I wonder if there's a world in which she was talking to a presenter on the radio and thought, I'm just going to say this, see what happens, let the chips fall where they may. But the question I want to ask you is, do you think that this spells the end for Keir Starmer?
In the wake of bruising local election results and growing internal dissent, the Labour Party finds itself caught in an unusual squeeze. Bleeding votes to Reform UK on the right and to Zach Polanski's revitalised Green Party on the left. Now, backbench MP Catherine West has publicly called for a leadership contest, putting Keir Starmer's premiership under fresh scrutiny. In the clip you're about to watch, commentators dissect whether Starmer chased Reform voters at the cost of his base, why Angela Rayner's resignation still echoes, and whether Andy Burnham could be Labour's lifeline. Listen for the rhetorical moves and the moments where speculation slips in as analysis.
No, but because I think if you have a coherent narrative and you can, portray where you want to go and have some policies, I think that can be overcome now. And I don't think Starmer can do that.
Well, you'd have to have a hell of a social media team, I think. I mean, if you look at what the right-wing press are attempting to do at the moment with Zach Polanski, as somebody who, whatever you think of him, has a very clear vision and is a very skilled communicator. What he does have on his side, though, is the ability to get his message across via alternative methods, mainly via social media. But I think that what these local elections have shown is the extent to which the general public are still, to an extent, at the mercy of tabloid narratives.
Yeah, I think that's true to an extent, but I think if you can, convey something of, sort of, an economic policy, and because I think that one of the sad things is, the current government have done some quite decent things, but they've not been able to communicate them because they started off so badly by following, Tory fiscal rules and hedging on things like the winter fuel allowance and the child benefit. So it got into people's minds that they weren't really standing up for people and all that. And I think that is hard to change, but I think it is possible. And I think Labour, I've got a lot of resentment to say Labour, but I think, if you look at the demographic, the way the political system, they're probably the only people that can stop a reform government. So I think it has to be done, because I think
I think you could be right, because I was listening to some analysis on my colleague James O'Brien's show earlier in the week, and what he was saying, and others too that were contributing to the show, was that Keir Starmer, as you quite rightly say, David, did try to follow a reform blueprint in many respects, particularly on immigration, thinking that the core vote of Labour, those who are left-leaning, would have nowhere else to go, and saying, well, if you don't like it, leave. Then Zach Polanski came along and gave those people another place to place their vote, and many did choose to leave in their droves. So Labour is now in a position where they're hemorrhaging support from both sides. And I don't know whether Keir Starmer can ever win back the trust of those core voters who saw him give that Island of Strangers speech, or announce that they were going to go after disabled people to try and reduce the welfare state. All of these things which felt so fundamentally un-Labour.
I wouldn't rush into things just yet. If I was Labour, I would lick the wounds a bit, understand what really happened, and then get round the table and hash it out, to be honest. And, whether that's likely to happen is anybody's guess. Hence the news today. But my opinion would be maybe they should not rush into things because it looks like a panic-induced hit. And plan things out and maybe, agree internally a structure and a plan forward. They're going to change and why, and then announce it at the conference.
I agree with you that if things are done at the behest of Catherine West, an MP that very few people have heard of, it will look like panic, and that they may not arrive at the best decision. But bear in mind, all that Catherine West is hoping to trigger is a leadership contest. It's not like a replacement will be announced on Monday morning. There will be an opportunity for all of the candidates to put forward their case to the Labour membership. A vote will take place. I think the biggest problem that the Labour Party face is that, Andy Burnham aside, who at the moment isn't eligible to qualify for leadership, there is nobody who the Labour membership would vote for that is also popular with the wider electorate.
Yeah, I completely see the point. In my opinion, on potential successors, beyond Andy, doesn't seem to be anyone of note that comes to mind. I have Angela, obviously, but there was the minor mishap of tax incident.
Yes, and I was listening to Luke Trill from More in Common speak about this, and apparently outside of the Labour membership, again, that really has stuck, that very ill-advised mistake that she made with her taxes has embedded a kind of an idea that all politicians are the same, which is so dangerous, because you have something like what Angela Rayner did, and somebody of her stature being Deputy Prime Minister definitely should have double, triple checked, got better advice. I for what it's worth, I believe she made a genuine mistake, but it wasn't acceptable, and it was right that she stepped down. But then because of that, people are hearing about Farage and the £5 million bung before he became Prime Minister, and they're treating those two things, £5 million from a crypto billionaire and Angela Rayner and her stamp duty, as though they are exactly the same and all politicians are the same. And at worst, you get apathy as a result of that. Well, at best you get apathy, I should say, and at worst you're ushering in these populists who are always promising jam tomorrow. So I agree with you that Andy Burnham is probably the only option, and that is a much longer term plan. I keep wondering whether she just decided to say that on air, because it's a really extraordinary thing to do, particularly given the time frame that we're working with here. And of course, all we're talking about is launching a leadership contest. It doesn't necessarily mean that she wants Keir Starmer to step down by Monday morning, but still, I do wonder if there's a world in which she was talking to a presenter on the radio and thought, I'm just going to say this, see what happens, let the chips fall where they may. But the question I want to ask you is, do you think that this spells the end for Keir Starmer?
So what did we just hear? A diagnosis that Labour is hemorrhaging support on two fronts, a structurally sharp observation, wrapped in a lot of hedging, narrative framing, and emotional language. Notice how the current government have done some quite decent things, but they've not been able to communicate them, assumes the policies are good before proving it. That's a common move in political commentary, framing failure as a messaging problem rather than a substantive one. Also worth flagging, the public's tendency to equate Angela Rayner's stamp duty error with Nigel Farage's reported crypto-linked payments is a genuine false equivalence, but using it primarily to defend one figure rather than examine media framing weakens the point. As Labour weighs its options ahead of party conference, watch whether the conversation shifts from personality to policy, because that's where the real reckoning lies.